Ronald Simpson-Bey. Ronald and I met not quite a year ago, earlier this year actually, at a restorative justice forum in Detroit that pulled all practitioners together to talk about this new movement that we're experiencing pretty heavily in Southeast Michigan, but also across the state and really across the nation. There are a lot of initiatives happening throughout the country that is, they maybe call it different things, but it's all based on this concept of restorative justice and practices, pulling to keep people together to talk and make critical decisions together in group form. So many of you know the center has dived into that arena as well. So I was so impressed with Ron's perspective and the work that he's doing. Ron is here today representing the American Friends Service Committee, specifically the Good Neighbor Project. And basically he talked a little bit about returning citizens, those who have been incarcerated and they return back to their community. And recidivism in Washington County is actually pretty high. I think at one point was the highest in the state. So in listening to him and preparing for the Brown Bag series with Sally, we talked about diversity and we thought, well, this is a segment of our community that we don't talk about a whole lot. And this is an important group in our community that certainly needs the principles and values of restorative justice to be wrapped around them as they make their transitions back into the community, get reconnected, and redefine their lives and live more productive lives. So in that vein, we thought it might be appropriate to have him come and talk about his work and give us another segment, introduce us into another segment of our community here in Washington County. So I'll let Ron go into more information about himself.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. May I stand?
Certainly.
I like standing and talking. It is truly an honor, a privilege, and a blessing to be here among you. I give thanks to Belinda for inviting me, Sally for all the work she did, emailing back and forth to make this happen, and for the Friends for allowing me the opportunity to work in this position. As she stated, I work for American Friends Service Committee here in Ann Arbor, over on Hill Street. I started there last December 5th as an intern, and I recently became a staffer. And
1 year.
Yeah, 1 year, absolutely. So they hired me to develop and head up this restorative justice project we call the Good Neighbor Project. And as I was sitting here listening and thinking, I thought about a quote that Dr. Martin Luther King once said. He said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And there's a heck of a movement underway in our country right now toward justice, social justice, restorative justice, healing justice. Like she said, it's under all these different banners, all these different names, but it's bending toward justice. Because if you look back over the last 30, 40 years, we've gone through that cycle of, lock them up, throw away the key, tough on crime, all these punitive measures. We took the humanitarianism out of dealing with our fellow citizens. I don't even call them prisoners anymore, I call them incarcerated citizens. Because 90% of them are returning back to our neighborhoods, to our communities. So it would behoove us not to address this part of the community that's returning. We talk about crime in our communities and recidivism and what have you. Crime is really actually committed by a small percentage of the population. Michigan has 10 million people, but there's only 40,000 people in prison. So that's a small percentage, and that's fraud, drug, your whole plethora of crimes are done by a small group of citizens. So it should be easy enough for us to address this part of the population. I was listening to a presentation I was at last night, and the speaker talked about, in human history, all major reforms have started through grassroots movement, from the ground up, so to speak. Religious reform, social reform, all the reforms, the rise of the middle class America began with the unions and the people coming together to address issues. It wasn't done from the top down. It wasn't done by government, it wasn't done by corporation, it wasn't done by big entity. It was done by the people. So it's from that premise that my project, the Good Neighbor Project, is operating. What we strive to do through the Good Neighbor Project is to apply restorative justice practices and principles to prisoners serving long life and indeterminate sentences in Michigan. And what we seek to do is to link them with one-on-one mentors, co-mentors, we call them co-mentors on the outside, because we feel that it's not a one-way mentorship from the outside in. people on the outside need to be educated as well. Who better to educate these people than those that's inside? I stand before you as someone who served time in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I served 27 years, from 1985 to 2012, for a crime I finally exonerated. The federal courts reversed my conviction and let me out 2 years ago. So, I mean, I'm not bitter, I'm not angry. I'm just glad to be able to be doing this work. I mean, this is work, above my pay grade. I'm just glad to be part of it. But the Good Neighbor Project, in restorative justice, and many of you may know since you're involved in restorative justice, it's traditionally a connection between, a dialogue between the victim and the offender, usually one-on-one between the victim and the offender. We, as the Friends in the Good Neighbor Project, we see the community as a secondary victim because your quality of life is diminished through crime. Your neighborhood, your property values, everything is diminished through crime. So the community suffers from crime just as much as the victim does. Maybe not so much emotionally, but definitely there's a tangible suffering there for the community. So the community should be active in empowering themselves to determine what type of person returns back to the community. Are they going to be an asset? Are they going to be a liability? Are they going to continue to commit crime, or are they going to be taxpayers trying to seek jobs, trying to help children or juveniles that's at risk, people that walk in the shoes that they came through? What better messenger than the person that's gone through it? It's funny, when computer security companies trying to improve their security, they hire the hackers. When police trying to stop car thefts, they hire the car thefts to give them, how do we stop this? So hey, we come to the prisoners to bring the message. Those that that want to be the message, and I hope to be that message. And in this Good Neighbor Project, what we want to do is we have developed a curriculum for interacting between the citizens and the prisoners. It's not just a pen pal, feel good communication thing, because we want to implant good principles in them: empathy, accountability, self-reflection, all these things that'll make them good neighbors when they return to our communities. And those that serving long sentences in prisons, they the ones that had the most impact on the young guys that's coming back out 2 or 3 years. That's probably going after that population. Because people are asking, Ronald, why aren't you going after the nonviolent drug offenders and stuff? And that's a misnomer, because the nonviolent drug offenders, those are the ones that are wreaking the most havoc on your communities. Those are the ones that's the impetus for most of the crime. People got to have the drugs, so they go steal property, they break in, they do all the stuff to get the drugs. Whereas people that commit, serious crimes such as murder and the more violent crimes, their recidivism rate is super low. They don't usually recidivate. In the last 2 years, Michigan has released like 150 lifers. People don't know this because it's kind of quiet. Only 2 of them have returned. Only 2 out of 150, where the recidivism rate is up around 50, 60%. Only 2 lifers, people that have committed murders, that have been released, served 20 and 30 years, got released, and only 2 of them have gone back. And those for technical rule violation, showing up late to the probation officer, or coming back late from a curfew. So those weren't even serious crimes they committed, they're just technical rule violations. So this is the best population we figured that we should go after to teach these principles to the younger prisoners. Because a lot of times, the younger prisoners, they don't listen to a lot of people from the outside trying to get them, because they have all these chances, people talking to them all their lives, they just kind of ignore it. But once you get in the reality of prison setting, you walk in there, and these guys have been there 20, 30 years, and you're not sure how to handle yourself, you go to them for guidance. It's inherent respecting people that have already served long sentences inside prison, so them to impart these principles and these restorative rules to the younger population. So we can make a wider impact just getting at that segment of the prisoner population. And through this curriculum, we're going to have them writing letters a couple times a month, phone calls if the participants want to participate in phone calls with the prisoner, and if they want to at some point in time, if they're comfortable with the relationship, to even go visit. Develop that one-on-one relationship. So the prisoners that have been in a long time, they feel a sense of support, a connection to the community. Now they feel like they're invested, they're stakeholders as well. And they're going to be more inclined to do what's needed to be done. And at the same time, we want to promote heart change in the people that's on the outside. Politics right now, politics and prison reform, what have you, is driven by fear and fear-mongering. The politicians know that, they use the anger of the community, they use the anger of the victim, and they feed off of that to pass these, legislative measures that are no use to anybody. They further erode our communities, especially the inner city and urban communities. They take the resources from them. They don't give anything back. They don't give the victims much choice or much voice in the punishment that's being meted out. So we feel that if we can get a more balanced conversation in these discussions in the lawmakers and the policymakers with the DOC and what have you, between the community and them, then we have more useful legislation. We have more useful practices being put forth. Because right now it's all one-sided. Lock them up forever, super predators, blah, blah, blah. Nobody on the other side is saying, look, these are humans too. These are our sons. These are our daughters. These are our family members. And these people are returning to our communities. Do we want them returning angry and feeling like they're owed something? Or do we want to make them feel like they're stakeholders? That they come to the table to be, like I said, to contribute to the community. If a person feel like connected, and when you have a stake in something, then you're more committed to making an improvement in it. And it don't take a lot of money. People come out, they don't always get jobs. I didn't get a job when I first got out, but I was determined not to commit any crime to go back. You can believe that. So I settled for what I got and threw myself into this work. And the dividends come as I move forward. And if you can impart that thought to the people that's returning home, they'll be more likely not to recidivate. They say, oh, there is something for me to do. People care. And then they'll take less to get more. So the Good Neighbor Project tends to, or seeks to, have heart change so we can change public opinion and to provide a measure of support for those that have served long sentences inside. There are currently around 5,000 lifers in Michigan. In Michigan, you have two types of life. You have non-parolable life, and you have what's called second-degree parolable life. Non-parolable life means the only way you can get out is through commutation by the governor. Second-degree life, which is parolable life, means after a certain number of years, you're eligible for parole. You go to the parole board, and you have to go before your sentencing judge has to approve you going before the parole board. Then you go before the board, and you get reviewed. It's a long, drawn-out process, but there is a way for them to get out. Through the support process, the outside people can write support letters. So I've been in a co-mentorship project with this gentleman for a year, 2 years, 3, or whatever it's been. I see it's changed, and the development. I would not mind having as a neighbor, and it's a win-win situation. And there's nothing like a person that has gone through the prison system and has rehabilitated themselves. Like, man, I do not want to go back because it's a horrible experience. They're the best neighbors you want to have because they're not going to let anybody do anything in your neighborhood to help send them back. Trust me, they go confront the guys on the corner selling drugs. They'll confront the people stealing bicycles. They'll do stuff that the average citizen won't normally do. Hey, I've been there. Trust me, I know. I do it myself. If I see somebody suspicious on the block, what you doing down there? You don't live over here. You got some business down here? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I mean, you have to have those people that's willing to step up and do it. And people that have been inside that don't want to go back, trust me, they have no problem stepping up doing it. So I would hope that, you as a group, who are interested in this project, or your churches, or your civic groups, or who you may know, may want to be involved with it. I attached the application sheet. We hold training sessions. We have training seminars to train people to participate in the project. So when we get enough interest, we hold training seminars wherever, churches, or auditorium, wherever people want to gather to have this training. We would definitely do a training. I did one last month in Grand Rapids. Did one in September over here at the Unitarian Church in Ann Arbor. So I'm open to it.
Are you talking about training for mentors?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're doing restorative justice training for the co-mentors. To train them how to interact with the people on the inside. Because there's a lot of rules, there's regulations, certain stuff you can't mail in, certain things you don't want to say. It's a political entity. So it just teaches you the rules of engagement, so to speak. And to keep you from being scammed by a prisoner that may or may not have the right motive. Not all of them going to have the right motive. We screen them first. We have an application process for the prisoner. Well, if they file, there's a real extensive application process. I laugh because I get mail from, I talk to someone on the phone sometime. They say, hey man, they didn't ask me this many questions in my pre-sentencing report before I get to prison. So we screen them real thoroughly because we want to protect the citizens as much as we want to protect our program. This is my baby, and I'm not going to let any prisoner. I was in it 27 years. I know those guys, so I'm not going to let any of them jeopardize it by trying to ask for money or solicit some unwarranted assistance from you guys, anything. So I would hope that there's an interest, that you got that question, that you guys invite me to your other events to pitch this, and that some of you decide to become co-mentors. Hey, it'd be a beautiful thing. I thank you for your time and allow me to present. Anything I can answer, feel free to ask.
Have people been through your program yet? You started?
Yeah, we had our first training in September, and we had another one in last month in Grand Rapids in November. And the people that we got to sign up so far, we're gonna start the links in January. We're gonna launch it. I mean, we're gonna actually make the connections. We're doing all the screening and the connections right now. We go through the prisoner's application, and we look at the application from the people outside. We try to make matches according to what they have, some of their hobbies, religious preferences, or group of questions that we take to consider who might be good matches. And the matches are going to actually start communicating next month.
So what does that entail? So they're sending you, you're writing them directly in prison, they're directing you your mail to your home, and then you're just kind of.
Well, initially what we're doing, because we don't initially want the prisoners having the participants' home address, and everybody might not be comfortable with that. So we have them send it to our office, AFSC, and then we'll forward it on to those on the outside. And the people on the outside, we suggest they get post office boxes, which relatively nominal. And if they want to do it directly, instead of going through our office, they can get a PO box and do it themselves. But until they feel comfortable with their link having their home address, we doing all the mailing back and forth ourselves.
And I was just curious about the writing. So what is it? Just I won't say pen pal-ish, but.
Well, there's a career. We have like what is empathy? And we have situational parts of the curriculum where it might be an event in the news. You might see a particular crime happen in your neighborhood, and you would pose a question to your co-mentor saying, "Well, if this happened to your family, friend, sister, whatever, daughter, how would you feel about it?" Makes them reflect, makes them internalize, because a lot of times they don't think like that. A lot of them, they've been predators all their lives. They never thought about the impact it has on the people that they victimize. So when you ask them certain questions, or you pose, what is empathy? What is self-accountability? In what circumstances do you feel it's okay to break the law? And you dialogue with them, because we want the people on our side to hold their feet to the fire. If you get a response back that's, is crazy, is not right, hold their feet. Say, man, what makes you think that? Who wants you to be a neighbor? This is how you think it. And it makes them reevaluate their thought process. And over a period of time, they'll start to internalize that. Humans are creatures of habit. Once you start doing something long enough, it becomes habit. And it does no good for a guy that served 20, 30 years, 6 months before his out date, now you're trying to put him in a reentry program to come home. He's not going to internalize what you're trying to teach him in 6 months. It doesn't work.
When you, Ron, match folks up with someone in prison, is the incarcerated person someone whom you expect is either going to be paroled within a given period of time? And is there some kind of window that you're operating in when you make a match, so that if you hook me up with somebody inside Jackson, for example, that you have some sense that the person I'm mentoring is going to be out in 2, 3, 4 years, so that there's a long glide path, or whatever kind of glide path you think is appropriate to work with somebody and mentor them.
Well, in our project, the people that we're recruiting, the prisoners, technically we don't expect to get out for a long time. A lot of them serving first-degree life sentences. They've been in 20, 30 years. The only way they can get out is through commutation, and most governors don't do commutation, so that rarely happens. Now, the second-degree life, that's a different story. There's a trend back and forth. They'll make them serve. At one time, they were getting out at 15 or 20 years, then they upped it to like 30, 35 years. Now it's kind of swinging back toward the 20s, where they're starting to kind of, depending on what your prison record was. So realistically, I don't expect any of our participants to be out within 4 or 5 years. But the commitment, if you do decide to participate, we just want at least a 1-year commitment from the outside people. You don't have to commit any longer than that. If you like the relationship or link that you're in, you can continue it. If you like, that's fine. If you want to terminate it early, we have a termination process. So if you want to be linked with somebody else, then we have a whole process to do that. But like I said, we don't have any realistic expectation for them to be out anytime soon. And your obligation is only for a year. You got any follow-up on that? Gotcha.
You talked about the training program. Now, what would that entail? Training, because you said you did a training in Grand Rapids. And
Yeah.
So what training?
The training is very extensive. To give you some idea, I'm trying to shorten it. We start at like 9 in the morning. It goes to almost 3 with like a half-hour lunch and a break or 2 in between. And we cover everything from the political end of it, you know, how this ties in politically, what we're trying to do. We have a whole extensive section on dealing with prisoners, writing the prisoner policy, phone policies, visiting policy, mail policies. I mean, the Michigan Department of Corrections is very, very policy driven. So you have to be aware of these policies. You know, if you haven't been involved in it, there's a lot of things you take for granted that aren't allowed to be, you know, communicated. Everything, you know, all your phone calls are recorded, so you need to know that. You know, there's certain things you just want to avoid. So we train them in that. We have a section dealing with the women prisoners, which is a little bit different communication issue than the men, which I've discovered as being. In my board of directors, some of my board of directors are inside prisoners, and I have an outside board of directors. And I've had a heck of a time communicating with the women prisoners because it's a different dynamic communicating with them, which I discovered.
Like what?
Yeah, who can figure? Like they're women. But we have a section where formerly incarcerated women come and do a presentation explaining how to deal with the women. I mean, because it's a little bit different beast than men. There's a section, if we have time, dealing with drugs and what have you in prison, that whole aspect, how you deal with drug issues or mental issues, people that have formerly substance abuse issues, and they may be recovering or may have been out of them, and it's how you deal with them on that level. It's a whole variety. We try to cover everything we can in these training sessions. Like I said, they're about 5-6 hours long. We're trying to cut them down, but it's pretty intense. I had somebody over here, but I got you, sir.
My question is twofold. First of all, is there a youth offender component to this project? And my second question would be, how has the community of faith responded towards supporting the project?
At this time, there's no youth offender component of it because the nature of it that you have to have served almost 20 years to be eligible for our project. So most youth by the time you get the 20-year mark are 35, 40 years old. Although I personally do some juvenile justice work on the outside of my job. I work in that area myself, but this project does it. And as far as the faith-based community, we've had a lot of buy-in from the faith-based community. And we just kind of getting off the ground. I'm doing a training session in Detroit next month, and some of the Detroit churches are sponsoring and supporting it. I got one scheduled for Flint, Kalamazoo. They're all the faith-based people are getting on board with it. Unitarians in Ann Arbor, they've been a big support. And they contact me all the time, when you gonna come back and do another training? So it's the faith-based community, they're stepping up to the plate.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, one of my former clients may be the secondary degree people that have gotten out. Do you recommend that I volunteer to mentor or not mentor somebody like that? And this, because of my prior representation of that second degree.
Oh, I would definitely, you already have some knowledge of it. I would definitely recommend you.
And the other part is, what do you recommend that if we volunteer, many of us have families or children to live with.
Mm-hmm.
Do we consult with our family members to let them know we're volunteering because it's going to come up, and they might be scared when they get out.
Right.
And even though my wife's a psychiatric nurse, it might frighten her. So do you let everybody know, because there's always the potential that they would come to your home and do something nice?
To me, I always recommend transparency. I mean, if you got a family that's gonna have those concerns, then raise the concerns with the family. It may not be a good fit. It's not a good fit for everybody, and I understand that. If you're able to do it, fine, do it. If you have, if it's gonna create conflict within the home, I mean, you have to address that, one-on-one. But I would discuss it with them, certainly. Don't keep it from them. That's a heck of a surprise. Guess who's coming to dinner?
Yeah, keep it heavy.
Are there any similar programs to this? And if so, what has the outcome been?
There aren't any. This is a groundbreaking program in Michigan. That's what's so exciting about it. And this is a concept that whose time should have been done 20 years ago, if you ask me. But there aren't any similar projects in Michigan. I haven't found any across the country. And I've been to some other restorative justice seminars around the country, and none of them have had this particular component. They all deal with the mediation between the victim and the offender, but none of them deal with the community at large and a co-mentorship between the incarcerated and the free people. So I'm excited about that aspect of it. I got him, didn't you?
A little bit of a follow-up to that question. Do you have other partnerships within the communities, such as employment, help with employment, so that you're working with other entities?
We're trying to develop that. I mean, right now it's kind of a one-man operation, me and whenever my colleagues at work can kick in, they help. So I'm juggling a lot of balls. I'm developing a resource that I'm reaching out to put that component in it, because I have people organizations that are interested in providing employment and support services. And I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, you know, like Linda's organization, she has stuff going on. I'm sure our network, I'll be able to refer these people to these groups if I'm not able to, you know, put it together myself.
What kind of mentoring did you have during the time that you were incarcerated? And presumably this is sort of the only program now in Michigan. What are other incarcerated citizens receiving?
Well, that's kind of what sparked this, because I mean I recognize from being there so long that, you know, there was no mentorship. I mean, if you weren't a go-getter to get it yourself, read stuff, self-help books, and get with other people who were progressive and like-minded, you just didn't get it. There weren't very many people come from the outside in. Not that they didn't want to, but there was no vehicle for them to do it. Because I brought a lot of people in to do programs, and people from the community to do programs for the prisoners. And now, how can we help? How can we do more? Man, that's a good question. And then when I got out, we're doing parole. I go back in and do parole workshops now to help the guys prepare for parole. And one of the questions we get from the lifers all the time is, well, I've outlived my support group. I've been in 35 years. My family is dead. My children are gone. And nobody's in my life. So, and you tell me to get support letters, and who's going to write support letter for me? So this is kind of the answer to that question. I got you next one.
Okay. And I have a brother-in-law who's recently got out. He's been out for 4 years now, after 18 to 20 years now. And it was his 4th time up for parole. And it took 4 times of writing parole letters and trying to get housing and trying to prove that he had a job to get him out. And that was with family support.
Yeah.
And it's not easy.
It is not easy.
And we had this, not you, but this group was part of what gave us support, was contacting this group and saying, how do we do this?
Right.
And what are we doing? Because this was well before I was in law school. My mother-in-law was trying to do this for my son.
It's a process.
And most people will say, well, we don't want to come and live here, so
Yeah.
we have no place to live. He can't live there.
Because because you don't have that personal relationship. You know, when you don't have a one-on-one relationship, people don't know who the other person is. You know, we kind of get in our own cluster, so to speak. We otherize people. We want to keep them over there. We want to stay over here. We keep separation. But we know we don't make our community safer by creating artificial boundaries. I mean, we're all of the same break. We're coming back to this community, and we're all part of the community. So I mean, you're not going to create any harmony by keeping separation.
And then when you get parole requirements,
Oh man.
you have even more of a boundary, because in his case, it was, you can't have a computer.
Right.
Your cell phone must not have anything to take a picture with.
Exactly.
Now, do you want to know how many there are on the market right now? There are 2.
Yeah.
Exactly 2.
Yeah.
I can tell you because I had to go contact him,
Yeah.
because he needed a regular phone, and if you try to job hunt without a cell phone, it's not possible, so you got on the cell phone. And, but this is what we went through. And thank goodness these folks were here to help us navigate some of this. Because my husband's an engineer, my mother-in-law was a very smart woman, and I was in law school at the time, or we couldn't have gotten him.
Right. It's difficult.
And this is, this is brilliant, because it means that there's somebody that can speak for people, because he's got 4 other brothers to speak to.
Mm-hmm.
If my husband wouldn't speak for, And right now, and my brother-in-law is getting his master's degree on Saturday. He's gotten his associate's, bachelor's, and now his master's.
Oh, hey, bless you for the work you've done.
So I wanted to point that out. It is possible to succeed,
It's very
but
possible.
you've got to work.
You need some people that, I mean, that's what this
You need
training is
people to help
about, to help people prepare for that type of eventuality. A lot of family members really want to be involved. And I always encourage family members not to co-mentor a family person.
Correct.
Because oftentimes family people are enablers, so to speak. They enable the behavior initially. So they're not going to hold their feet to the fire, tell them if you're wrong or you thinking wrong. So it's good for them to be involved and to share what they know with their family person. But I'm not going to make any family linkages.
Family should be.
Absolutely. Got the lady in the back.
My question was kind of something going towards what you spoke about earlier about the younger people who are created the like re-offenders and everything, the non-violent drug offenders. So is the goal of the program to kind of help the old heads like get themselves organized so that they can impart this kind of wisdom to the younger people? Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the side benefits of the project because, like I was saying earlier, the younger prisoners look up to the older prisoners for all types of reasons. For respect, or for how to navigate the system, or just out of fear. Mm-hmm. And I used to always laugh because I use the analogy like they have this youngsters like to have their pants sagging. That always irritated me to no end. Pull your pants up. But in prison, an older guy tell a young guy, pull your pants up, and he won't even bat it. He pull his pants straight up, tighten his belt up. But people in the community won't do that. You approach it, you see a young guy in the store, you gonna walk away from him if he got his pants sagged. I ain't gonna say nothing to that fool. But in prison, the older guys, that's what they do. They take on those leadership roles, especially guys that are gonna be invested in this project. Yeah. And they gonna know this is gonna be what's expected of you. I mean, they got a set of rules and regulations. I mean, we got a whole pamphlet we sending them, and I'm going in to do training sessions to instruct them on what's expected of them. They're gonna have to reach to the younger guys going back and forth, because that's how they're gonna be able to give back to the community.
So is that I'm sorry, but is that like a goal almost to create like a mentor? Because you call them co-mentors, like so in a way like you create a mirror of what's happening on the outside as far as maybe a mentorship and helping with the juvenile offenders who the more outside people have access to, and then maybe on the inside having the old heads be able to kind of help the younger generations.
Exactly. The inside component is more of a mentorship because the younger guys need the instruction. The older guys, they've lived in there long enough, they know the inside, they know the politics, so they can teach the people on the outside what it's like to be in prison, why prison reform is necessary. They have the wherewithal to do that, where the youngsters don't. So the older prisoners will be mentors to the younger prisoners, where the relationship between the inside and outside people will be a co-mentorship because it's a giving back and forth.
So this kind of ties to that, but so the incarcerated citizens that are participating in this program, will they periodically, is the plan to have them meet and talk about their experiences with their co-mentors? And on the opposite side of that, are the co-mentors, is there going to be a way for those individuals to meet and talk about their experience so you can create a synergy?
Absolutely. And the project is, I developed into the project 3 additional training sessions during the year where the co-mentors can come together and discuss their experiences, either in a meeting like this or if it's more convenient through Google Chat or some of this technology I'm learning since I've been out here. They can do, Skype, Google Chat, and all that. They can go through the chat room and discuss it among themselves. And as far as it's a little bit more difficult for the prison because not all of them at the same facility. They have facilities all across the state. Now, if there's 2 or 3 that's at the same facility or a dozen, they can get together if they want to discuss it. I'm encouraging them to do it. I'm sending them the curriculum in. These are the questions they're going to be asking you, so you need to study and be able to, speak intelligently on this stuff. And they're going to have the same questions that the outside people have. So it's a meaningful dialogue. It's just not we springing this question on you. Tell me about your crime, which not everybody's comfortable talking about up front. So as you ease them into it, you break down these boundaries. So there are going to be meetings, definitely meetings for people on the outside. And hopefully the ones on the inside will be able to.
I think maybe I was curious as to why you're working with people who are not going to be out for a long time, rather than the ones who are about, who are going to be coming out another year or two. And what I understand it is that you build up this cadre of long-timers.
Yes, sir.
And teach them these principles, so that the younger people who are about to come out will go to them.
Absolutely. I think that the old timers are the ones that have the most impact. They have the most credibility with the younger guys. They're the ones going to have the most impact on them returning, because they can impart, the hardships to them. Man, I've been in prison for 30 years. You and youngsters, you got an opportunity to go back out and live your life. They can put it in perspective. Nobody on our side can do that. Nobody on our side has that same gravitas when it comes to explaining what prison life is. I've been in here 30 years. I lost my family member died. I wasn't able to go to the funeral. They tell you what time to get up every day. Tell you what time you use the bathroom. What time you can use the phone. What time you can eat. You get ready to go back out there and enjoy your life. They make them appreciate the simple things that everyday people overlook. Being able to get up in the middle of the night, go to your own refrigerator. That don't sound like anything to anybody here, but I explained that to my brother years ago, my youngest brother. Years ago, he said, man, what's one thing you miss about being home? I said, man, getting up in the middle of the night, going to the refrigerator, get something to eat. And I didn't think anything about it. 20 years later, he said, man, I never forgot you told me that. So there's little things like that that the old timer can impart to the youngsters to make them appreciate being out here. And they less likely to recidivate. They go to thinking about, man, I remember that old guy told me, the stuff he went through while he was in. I don't want to go back to that. I'd rather struggle out here than be in that tied up. So that's kind of what the impetus of it.
So a couple of years ago, the community read the new Jim Crow book.
Oh, great.
And we had discussions among the mediators here. So one of the things I remember so clearly is people would come out and couldn't do, as Elizabeth mentioned, I didn't even know about the phone business, but couldn't get a job, couldn't live there, couldn't do this, that, and the other thing. And so I thought these were like laws that the community imposed. So is it just custom, or?
It's a little of both. It's custom in some cases, laws in the other. Like if you're a sexual offender, you can't live within so many feet of a school. That's a law.
Aside from them, because that's another.
Yeah.
That's another issue.
Exactly.
But
it's just a stigma of being a felon, ex-felon. I mean, people. It's not a law. That's a custom. People have their own stereotypical images of who an ex-felon is, whether it's racial or just don't like felons.
So if they're paroled and they want to live in this housing development with their family, it's up to that community to say, we don't want them, or welcome them in?
To some degree, yes. And as sad as it may sound, the housing developments, they play a big role. Felons can't live in certain housing developments or apartment complexes and what have you. And it's kind of a discriminatory practice, but who's going to fight for them? They don't want the felons don't want any contact with the police or the courts. They're not going to go to court and file a lawsuit saying, well, I'm being discriminated against. They're just going to say, I don't want that hassle. I'm going to go over here and live.
So who sets up that they can't live here?
The housing associations, the community. It's just a welcoming people back or pushing them away.
Well, there's some federal laws too, that affect too. And federal housing, you're deprived of a lot of the rights that you once had.
Exactly.
By virtue of being federal. Then there's some subtle ones, like when you go to get the driver's license, you want to get automobile insurance, suddenly you can't get insurance. Now that,
Right.
or the rates are incredible high, incredibly high. And then you find out even members of your family are affected by this too.
Yeah.
Now, is that law?
No.
That's just general
Practice.
Exactly. That make it very.
And that's part of the long-term goal of this project, through these interactions to change these attitudes and harsh towards, some, not all felons, but some, not all of them are bad people. They just good people who make bad mistakes or bad choices. I don't even call them mistakes, bad choices. And once they internalize the bad choices they make and they're trying to redeem themselves, they give them the opportunity to redeem themselves. they mess up a second time, I say, hey, that's on you. You don't deserve another chance. You had your second chance. That's a wrap. Yes.
Do you know what percentage of incarcerated citizens are women?
There are just over 2,000 women in the Michigan Department of Corrections system. There are about 2,500, 2,600 maybe. They're all at one facility out here in Bemis Road, Huron Valley Women's Facility. So it's a much, much smaller percentage. Like I said, there's 44,500 prisoners in the system, and 2,500 of them are women, so 2% or something.
Are there other citizenship things that you get to? I was doing voter registration a couple years ago and encountered several men that said, I can't vote because I had a felony, which was inaccurate in Michigan.
Yeah, not in Michigan. Michigan
Right,
doesn't have
but
disenfranchised.
they were under that impression that they were not allowed to. And I just wondered if there are other things that you might get into around connecting to the community, like things like that.
Yeah, all that's part of the training session, because we try to address a lot of the misinformation that's out there. There's a lot of misinformation on both sides, on the inside and on the outside. Like there's this urban myth that's been going on as long as I can remember, that prisoners, once they get out, are entitled to Social Security. And that is absolutely, positively not true. When I was inside, I used to get memos from the Social Security office every year, photocopy them and paste them all over the prison, hand them out to the group, put them in the law library. You are not entitled to Social Security, but that rumor still persists to this day. I mean, so it's a lot of stuff like that that we inform the prisoners of, and we inform the community that has to be aware of. That's part of the training process. We try to identify those things where there's a lot of, gray area.
So just in terms of Social Security, so a prisoner is not entitled while they're there.
Right.
But
Once you're out.
Once you're out, and you have a regular job, do you pay into Social Security at this point?
Yeah, you do. A lot of older prisoners, they worked at like General Motors, and they had jobs before they went in, so they're entitled to Social Security benefits up on their release. They don't have access to them while they're inside.
Oh.
Now, if you're a guy that never held a job, and you go in, you did 20, 30 years, you don't have any Social Security coming. You have to get out, like I said, get a job, start like working like everyone else, and they take out. And whatever you make from the point you get out to the time you stop working is what you'll be entitled to.
Is there any retroactivity for Social Security when you get out, or do they start only, assuming they're entitled to it, will they start effective as of the date they get out?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one. I mean, that question hasn't come up, and that's a valid question. I'm glad I'm gonna check into that. I'm not sure if it's retroactive. I know it starts once you get out forward. I'm not sure if you had benefits built up, do you get to collect those retroactively? I'm not sure. Then there's another aspect. Retirement benefits come into question oftentimes for older prisoners. They retired from some corporation and they somehow were able to get their retirement benefits diverted before the state took them. Because once they know you got benefits coming, they take them and put them towards your housing, the cost of incarceration. So a lot of them get smart, or they get notified before they get looked. You need to do something to divert your retirement funds so they're not coming to you, or put them in escrow, do something. Give them to somebody else or hold them for you. And a lot of times they have to fight for them because the state will file a lien against them and go to court and try to take them. It's a very, very convoluted situation, but stuff like that always comes up. We try to, in AFSC, we try to navigate the inside people through those processes. Some of the things that we do through our office outside of the Neighbor Project.
I guess this gentleman answered my question. There's no retroactivity probably, but I recall I had someone on a CSC conviction in prison, and they immediately got their active retirement from their private business.
Yeah. I mean, each individual's situation is unique. You have to address them kind of individually. There's no one pill cures all when it comes to retirement and Social Security. You have to kind of take them individually.
I wonder if you're willing to share your story about what was the hardest thing that you were in there, and what was the hardest thing that when you came back, which you can use for your, like what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, the hardest thing, I mean, I was in 27 years, and I always teased. I said I did the same time Nelson Mandela did. I did Mandela time, but I didn't get none of his benefits when I got out, unless you guys don't support me for president. But being in prison it's hard to impart how difficult it was. One of the most difficult things for me was in 2001 on Father's Day. My only son, he was 21 at the time, was shot and killed by a juvenile. Oh, I'm sitting at the prison waiting for him and his sisters to come visit. And I'm sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. Nobody showed up. I start making phone calls and I find out my only son's been shot and killed by murder in Flint by a juvenile. I put the article on the back of the packet about I advocated for his 14-year-old killer not to get life in prison because I believed in restorative justice, redemption, and what have you. So I figured, well, I might as well learn how to practice what I preach. And so I advocated for the child not to get life in prison.
What happened?
He did. He ended up serving 7 years in the juvenile system, and they released him once they reevaluated him when he turned 21, and then they released him. And he had shown enough progress, and I'm in contact with him from time to time. He's doing okay. So that was when you go to prison, you lose everything. Before I went to prison, I was a journeyman tool and die maker at a General Motors plant in Flint. I worked for 10 years. At an AC spark plug as a journeyman tool and die maker. So once I went to prison, I lost my job, lost my cars, lost my home, lost my finances. After about 7-8 years in prison, me and my wife got divorced. My son was killed. So you lose. I mean, you just lose so much. You lose so. I mean, you have either it makes you bitter and angry, or it just makes you it stiffens your resolve. Say, well, I'm not going to let this break me. Because a lot of people go to prison, they just mentally can't take it, and they just devolve into mental illness cases. They be on psychotropic drugs, and they don't do anything to try to prove themselves. They just going through daily life not having any hope. And that's another aspect of this project, is to give people their hope. Hope is a very, very powerful thing. Somebody asked about, I think, the gentleman asked about how long do I expect these guys to do before they get out. A lot of these guys are never getting out. But if you give them a measure of hope, and make them feel like they're stakeholders in this process, that makes all the difference in the world in their existence in there. They feel human again. They feel worth something. A little measure of self-worth goes a long way, especially in a prison environment. And so once they realize that self-worth, they have a little bit of hope. If it's just a glimmer of hope, it's better than no hope at all. And they'll feed off that glimmer of hope, and it fuels everything that they do. They become passionate about trying to help the younger kids not make the same mistake that they do. So that's their way of giving back to the community. Say, I know I'm never getting out, but my way of giving back to the community is keeping this young guy from going to the community and praying on him. And they take that very seriously, trust me. Very serious. It's like father and son relationships in a lot of instances. Because I've seen guys, just break down and cry when the younger guy they were mentoring get transferred. It's like, like your child being moved away from. So imparting that hope to them is very important. And as far as getting out, the hardships of getting out, because I had the foresight to develop a support group, and she talked about, the lawyer talked about how you developed your family supported your brother-in-law getting out. And that's a very important thing. I developed a support group to help me with the transition. Because unless your support group is Bill Gates and Mother Teresa, ain't no one or two people gonna help you transition. There's too many obstacles. So developing a support group, because even when I got out, it was difficult to get a job. I was a journeyman tool and die maker. I couldn't get a job as a die maker anyway, even though I kept up with the technology. I became a paralegal while I was in prison. I worked 20 years at an office called Prison Legal Services in Michigan. While I was a paralegal, I litigated cases. I got people reverses. I won civil suits. I'm very knowledgeable in the law. I couldn't get a job as a paralegal anywhere. Just so happened, before I went to prison, I was a certified auto mechanic as well. My youngest brother opened a shop while I was gone, so I got home. I worked in his shop to support myself until I got this job as a member of the French Service. So you need that having that support once you get out, because if it gives you a sense of desperation, especially been in a long time. When I came out after 25 years, the world had changed. When I went into prison, the one thing that struck me when I first got back to my mother's house, the trees that were small and shrub when I went to prison were 50-foot trees now. It was like enchanted forest. I'm like, man, what the hell am I walking I mean, it's all these little changes that take place in 25 years. When I went to prison, there was no such thing as cell phone. The closest thing to a cell phone was a big suitcase thing with an antenna that you carry around in the car. Microwaves were overpriced, underpowered novelty. In 1985, they were microwaves, but they were crap and it cost too much. There was no internet. There was no laptops. PCs had a big 6-inch floppy disk. They held about 2 pages of memory. So I mean, so once I got out, you know, it was like I was like Fred Flintstone stepping into the Jetsons. You know, cars were talking, push button. I couldn't even start my car, my mother's car. My sister gave me a smartphone. I was too dumb to make it work. It had a screen that was blank. Okay, I'm looking for the button. How you dial this thing? I mean, those kind of things that people you take for granted because you've been out here in it. A person that's been inside has had no exposure to that. You know, no exposure to the internet. What is Google? What's that? I learned how to Google on a cell phone once I figured out how to phone. That was by accident. So I mean, it's all those little things, just the reacclimation to society. You know, the gender roles have changed a lot once from when I went into what I got. I had to get used to that. You know, the role, the power dynamic between men and women, the relationships, and just the whole dynamic in society, what's going on. You know, my youngest daughter, she had a partner, a female partner. So it took me a minute to adjust to that. I mean, when I went into prison, that was taboo. I came out as like, Dad, that's acceptable. To whom? So it's these kind of things that you have to, you know, reacclimate yourself. You have to adjust yourself to. I mean, I have a hard time being politically correct sometimes, so I try not to talk a lot on subjects I'm not too sure of. You know, I was in a bar one night, a nightclub when I first got out, and I didn't realize this power dynamic. I'm talking to a young lady I thought was real. She was nice looking. I bought her a drink, and there was a woman sitting next to her. I didn't realize it was her girlfriend. She got offended like she was a guy and wanted to fight me. And I had to like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, I didn't mean no harm. I'm sorry. I didn't know your girlfriend. So identifying those, and just those, you know, relationship issues they're funny, but they're difficult to acclimate yourself to inside. So a support group to guide you through the morass of, you know, coming back that's been my biggest challenge. I'm still having challenges. I've been out 2 years now. It's still challenging, but I'm enjoying every minute of it.
You spoke of the importance of family. The work I was doing in prison, we found out the biggest indicator of people never going back is, do they have a family to go back to?
Absolutely.
Yet the prison system makes it extremely difficult to carry on that relationship with your family. I mean, from visitations that, you know, just go walk down the street here. How do you visit?
Exactly.
With a television screen.
Yep.
And, you know, you're behind this. How can you can't touch.
Right.
There's nothing that way. So that really has to change. I mean, especially for people who are going to be in there for a while, maintaining the family contacts. You have that.
And then the transferring.
Oh, yeah, people they go to visit. He's not here.
Yeah.
Where is he?
In Upper Peninsula.
He's on. They say he's on the train.
Exactly.
He's on the train.
Yeah.
Someplace else.
Yeah, it's a lot of those policies that the department implements are, you know, they remove the humanness. They say they designed to disrupt the family relationship. They put all these barriers up. The visiting policy is a perfect example of that. You can, prisoners going to have 10 what they call immediate family members. I mean, they have unlimited immediate family members, but only 10 non-immediate family members. However, nieces, nephews, grandparents, none of them are considered immediate family. You know, only your children, your parents, your brothers and sisters. Aunts, uncles, cousins, nobody else is considered immediate family. If you live, you know, in a black family, everybody's our immediate family. You know, your aunt might have raised you, but she can't come visit because she's not your immediate family member. And so these things, I mean, that's one thing that we hope this project does is to, you know, the people are the ones that have to complain about it. If we don't have enough people outside on the ground that's complaining about it, you know, like I said earlier, reform starts from the bottom up, then the powers that be, they're not going to change. Nobody's holding their feet to the fire to change it.
Well, part of why people don't complain about it because it's such a stigma attached to having a family member that's, you know, a felon. Like that's something that you don't talk about or you don't
Right.
because, you know, it's reflected, you know, poorly, so you don't talk about it, and because of that, you aren't gonna be a strong advocate, you know, for what's going on, because people will look at you, why are you advocating, you know what I'm saying? So that, hopefully, your program will help take some of the stigma.
Oh, no
out
doubt,
of
that's,
it.
we fight to take the stigma. It shouldn't be a stigma there. I mean, the stigma is actually psychological. I mean, why should you care?
Well, it's the culture, what Phyllis was saying, it's the culture of it, so that's why there's so many barriers when people come out.
Well, there should be a stigma on alternative lifestyle. Now it's the norm. So stigmas can be overcome. It's like, you know, it just takes the people to complain that this should no longer be a stigma.
My two brother-in-laws who won't acknowledge their eldest brother are lawyers. They're saying, if people find out that my brother is a felon, it will affect my career, and I'm going, excuse me? I want him at my swearing-in ceremony.
Yeah, exactly.
To show that how successful you can be after you've been in prison and you want to reform yourself. It will not affect me.
Exactly. It's all about messaging.
It's
As
a-
Melinda knows, restorative justice used to be almost taboo. Like, restorative justice, you bleeding hard liberal, you being assaulted on crime, blah, 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 blah. But now it's the norm. Everybody's like, well, what can we do? The Republicans are getting on the bandwagon. What can we do for alternative sentencing? What can we do for dispute resolution? I mean, it's like, and now it's the norm. So stigmas can be turned around. It's just a matter of messaging. When you, like somebody say, you know, you want to make your swearing-in ceremony, and then somebody asks you why. That's when he's a successful member of society. He's a picture of redemption and transformation, blah, 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 blah. It's how you message it. When people come at me like that, I love talking about being in prison. You know, when I talk being in prison, I like a friend of mine said, I talk a dog off a meat truck. I want you to know I was in prison, what it was like, and how I transformed since being out. So it's all about messaging.
So I think a lot of this is getting into like advocate.
Absolutely.
And if you're a mentor, I think everyone kind of wants to help.
Yes.
Not just communicate, but help. Like, so what part of this advocate play?
There's a lot of there's a huge movement on the way dealing with advocacy. There's a lot of advocacy conventions going on, meetings and events and organizations that's doing advocacy work. I always tell people, try to identify a group in your area that's doing advocacy work and become involved somehow. I mean, you can go online, just look up, you know, prison reform or advocacy, and you find a list of organizations that's doing the work. Or organizations that's already doing it, they can refer you to other groups. If you don't want to work with their group, like in our office, we have a criminal justice segment. That's all we do in AFSC and our is criminal justice work. So all our work centers around prison. If you don't want to answer prisoner mail or work with prisoner issues, then we can refer you to another group that may be doing something in a community, as far as mediation or providing services or giving rides or going to talk about it. You know, just getting the message out there is a huge advocacy help.
Thank you so much, Ron. This was
Thank
really.
you. Thank you for having me.
People who want to talk?
I'm in no rush.
Yeah, okay, great. And our next round bag will be next year, 2015, can you believe it? On January 7th. I realize that the Dispute Resolution Center is going to be closed from Christmas until the January 5th. So we'll be having our very next round bag that same week, that Wednesday, after our office reopens. Okay.
Great. Well, hey, I thank you for having me, and I hope I can come back sometime. I hope I see some of your faces at a training session, or I hope you can invite me to do a training session. So, let's work together.
All right.
Thank you.
Good.